on my mind the last couple of weeks. So my immediate take on what men could learn from the women's game is when a player gets into a slump, is there something that coaches who work with women that helps get them out of a slump quicker? Because when a man gets into a slump, like, is there like he's lost his confidence? Like I'm talking about a scoring slump, or a defenseman perhaps playing bad defense, or like is there a piece of coaching that can be used that would normally be applied with a woman that could be applied to a man in order to help him get out of a slump quicker? So that was a question that I had around this.
Did you see Sami Jo's response?
No.
Sami, can you say that?
I would agree, Sami.
I'm just unmuting myself. Morris, that's a great question, but I think that in that particular aspect, women can learn more from men when it comes to that. I think women, it takes longer, Tim will attest this, to get out of the slump. I think we tend to internalize, this is a generalization. So when I talk about women, I say 80% of the women tend to internalize. And in fact, I feel like the women that get over it quicker, we often say in the women's game, think like a guy, which is not proper verbiage nowadays to say. But the ones that can really just own it, see it, be it, and move on. Whereas most women will not talk about it. Most women will beat themselves up over it more than men will, I think. That's just my outside perspective. But Dom specifically has worked with the age group, I think, that is really susceptible for beating themselves up. So Dom, maybe what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say the guys that made the highest level have made the highest level because they can get over a slump quicker. And I think that probably has something to do with it, to be quite honest with you. Like, because I'll be honest with you, with the guys that at the American League level, and if we've got 20 guys, there's 2 of them that are going to play in the NHL, right? But hey, not because they don't have the ability, and that's the one underlying thing. I mean, yeah, I would say that I don't think it's as the confidence that like the typical guy is as prevalent as you might think in regards, because you got to think there's 700 players in the NHL. There's a lot more than 700 players that play the game and that are not able to play in the NHL. And so I think the ability to get over it is an elite skill in itself, to be able to get out of a slump. In regards with the girls, that's I am so sensitive to the fact that any type of feedback to them is like they're constantly analyzing what they're being told by the coaches. So as I say, like, we take it for granted with the guys if we tell them, "What are you, stupid?" But like literally, guys will internalize that, and hey, if I'm a guy and I'm going to be like, do you think they're going to come to me and be like, "Hey, you called me stupid the other day"? Do you think they're going to come and say that? They're not going to say that, right? But it doesn't mean that it's not noted, right? So there's this perception that guys need to be this certain way to be able to play to just this persona. Hey, this shouldn't bother me. And like what we're finding is like guys are saying, we've got full-time sports psych on staff. Like, he's busy. He comes in, like, from the minute he gets there to the minute he leaves, he's talking with guys, right? And so, like, hey, there's, and it's taken a while for them to build up the trust from the players. But it's like, you would be shocked to the insecurities of these guys. But they're not supposed to be insecure, right? You're supposed to be tough. You're supposed to be able to do it and everything else. So that's where I say there's a lot more similarities between the two, because on the surface, you would think that there's, just your stereotypes, right? Girls are more sensitive, guys are less sensitive. You got to think more like a guy, like whatever. All the misconceptions. But I would say that, like, and we're learning this like real time, is that guys are ultra sensitive and way more than you think that they are. And on the girl side, and Sami Jo, you can speak to this. Like, it's tough to get coaches to shut up, to be quite honest with you, because any type of feedback you give them, they're gonna be like, well, what did he mean by that, right? As opposed to being like, okay, like, great job, like, obviously super positive, constructive, in a way that, I mean, you have to be careful with your word, right? You just have to be, as a coach, you have to be careful with your word. Like, and I've learned that a lot on this call, just on email threads back and forth, with just common phrases that are just being used, that you don't think any of them and you just say them, and they mean so much more than what they actually mean. And on the girls' side, that comes in, like, a lot of these dads, they'll just spurt something out, like something, and they think nothing of it, but that's just running around in their head. On the boys' side, same thing. Like, you gotta have some relationships with some guys, they'll come back to me 6, maybe 4 or 5 months later, and they'll be like, they'll bring up a conversation that happened 4 or 5 months ago, right? And I'm just like, where did that, right? So yeah, I don't know if that helps anybody, but
Dominic.
Yeah.
And how about if over the week we give some thought to what are the steps of helping a player come out of a slump? Like, what are the coach's responsibilities? Or, like, is there an ABC that can be put together? Obviously, the sports psychologist is doing it, and he may not have played hockey. Like, Saul Miller never played hockey, Dr. Saul Miller, and yet he coached players on how to play peak performance. So I'd be interested in seeing, like, if you're willing, I'll put together, and
Absolutely.
I believe, let's put together some points on what would be the keys in helping a player get out of this. I'm going to tell 2 quick stories. One is when Andy Murray, does everybody know Andy Murray?
Yes.
Okay, so Andy, there's this story about, he was coaching university, and I believe it was in Brandon. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so they had a team meeting, and the captain expressed to Andy that the players felt that they had lost some of their confidence. And Andy said, really? He says, yes, and because they were in a bit of a slump. And so the captain said they thought that was one of the reasons, is that they had lost their confidence. So Andy heard this and thought about it for a few seconds, and he said, I'll be right back. And he left, and he came back, and he had, if there was 20 guys on the team, he had 20 envelopes. And he gave an envelope to each one of the players, and then he said, okay, let's open up this envelope. And they all opened it up, and inside was a note, like a piece of paper, and on it was written the word confidence. And he says, there, you have your confidence back. Let's get going. And so I thought that was a fascinating story of how Andy handled that piece. The second thing is, one time in the NHL, I got into a slump where, while I was scoring in my early days in the NHL, I went 15 games one time without scoring. And I was absolutely befuddled by it, because, like, I feel one of the key things in helping a player get out of a slump is make sure that he's getting the scoring opportunities. Let's figure out how to create more scoring opportunities. It seemed to me I was having the scoring opportunities and wasn't scoring. And literally, I went 15 games without scoring. And then in a game in Quebec, I finally scored a goal, and to end it, the slump, and then went back out on the ice for the next shift and scored a second goal. So here I went 15 games without scoring, and then scored 2 in 2 shifts. So that was sort of a weird moment, because I was wondering, what the hell how come, like, what's that about? So, I mean, just a couple of things to consider.
Morris, I think it was Tim that said, do you know what happened to Andy's team after that? Did they break out of the slump?
What?
That's the key question.
Yeah. what he did he get the result he wanted with his team?
I don't know. That was,
Well, that's the point of what we're talking about here.
all I know is the story. I'd have to get a hold of Andy and ask him, which, what I can maybe do.
And for me, in some ways,
I don't think I would do that. And
Why?
I want to mention, I know it was Bob Johnson with Lanny McDonald in a slump. He had there was two things that related to emotional intelligence with Bob. And in the slump, he had the video guy put together all the positive clips of the goals he'd scored, made him look at them. End of story. He just had to stop worrying and thinking about the past and what was wrong and appreciating what he could do. And he made that point looking at video. The other story, and I've told it before, they used to post plus and minus statistics in the Flames dressing room. And Bob was in the hallway watching the players as they went over. When Lanny McDonald looked at his stats, he saw it was just his expression. He deflated. He put his head down. They never posted stats again. And that's an example of the awareness of what you do as a coach to influence the player's mindset that's going to affect how he plays. And Dom, what are you taking out of this discussion?
Yeah, no, because obviously, there's and we went through it, and we've had this discussion before, Wally, and I apologize for those that have heard this before, but we like at one point in our, I can't remember which season it was, might have been last year, the year before, we had a problem with accountability. And so players were, wanted us to hold players more accountable, whether it was, in game or whatever else have you. And we debated it back and forth a little bit in regards to thinking, well, yeah, it's fine, but we still want to encourage, guys to be able to play without having us down their throats. So we didn't want, but we do need to have some level of accountability. And what we came up with is, and we started posting different types of, I started thinking about posting different types of stats. And so, what we came up with is, because we take plus minus of the chances. So chances created, chances not, our chances against, if you're, a primary, and then two secondary on either side. And so, but what we found is for sure the players were glued. They were waiting for them to come out, and they were like, but what we actually found is guys were like literally fact checking us, because like they weren't posted anywhere. It wasn't like it was on the American League site. We came as a staff, we came together as a staff, and we basically broke down every single chance. And trust me, it was painful to go through, because it was like the goalie coach was like, well, that's not a chance, or that's a chance. And so it took forever to get through. But on a couple things, it helped our process in regards to understanding what we were and weren't doing well. But on the other side, like, we had to think of it, okay, well, we're going to get these guys coming in to ask, and in a way, it actually benefited from the players taking more interest in what was going on, because it created accountability with his teammates. Because he would go and he'd be -5. We'd literally have guys coming in, I want to look at my chances against. Well, that's not a chance. Why is that a chance? Well, that's not a chance again. So I understand, Wally, what you're saying with Lanny in regards to, he's probably embarrassed about his performance, and he's a Lanny. I don't know Lanny at all, but I would assume that he was a really proud guy, and that affected him psychologically for sure. But from our standpoint, and what we posted, it had a big of it was an accountability piece, and we've stayed with it because we feel that it's had that level in regards to not just, the guy goes out and scores 2 goals, but he's a +2, but he's a -6 over the course of the game. There's that little bit of accountability, because at the end, we really don't want to be there every single time someone comes off with a mistake and being able to be, like sitting there waiting for him at the door. We just felt that's not the best result there either. So there has to be some level of accountability. But
Dom, to me, the statistics, to use them like that, it is like, I haven't coached at that level, but they're for coaches, and to use them on players to try to create accountability, I don't know. It's a pretty sensitive thing. Did it help you? Did it help the team perform better and well? Did the players get anything out of it, or did they create more doubt, trying to justify where they were relative to the stats that were posted, which are pretty objective stats? But
Yeah.
how did it affect what was the impact of it? Because it's what you do and how you do it that influences how they're going to feel and perform down the road. So I understand the accountability piece, but it's sort of like the video session you held where you're in groups of 4, you sent it out to everybody, and everybody looked at it. And if somebody didn't, they held him accountable. The players held him accountable. So that's what I mean about, the strategy that you decide as a coach. It's really about right stuff, right amount, right time, and right way. Such a simple formula for coaching. It is the art of coaching and deciding what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So, Sammy, I'm thinking of the female game. I wrote down here as soon as Morris asked the slump question. I've never ever thought of a female hockey being in a slump. And I don't know, it's because it was with the national team. We had a season and we weren't in a league standings, and you had to perform, and then you were exposed. You were always under the gun because you were evaluated every practice and every game. And the coaches meticulously go through that. And I tried to implement in the program, when we did the evaluations for development, we knew what areas they had to improve in because of the way they were rated. And we tried to give the program of excellent tools to weaknesses. So while we're evaluating to select at the national level when you're centralized, you're evaluating to develop at the program of excellence, not to pick a team that you think might win the game right now. But I was hoping you're picking a team who's going to have players that will make the national team someday. So you have to develop them. But what's your idea on the slump? You were a GM of a pro team. You saw coaches. You worked with. You had a mentor. Was slump even a word that entered your vocabulary?
So great conversation, Wally. I think the unpacking some of the things you said. Firstly, with the national team, I think we as players all went through it, and we were never in a space where you could share that with a coach. So you said exactly what you said. Every game, every practice, you're being evaluated. So it's just a completely different mentality than what a regular league team would be going through. So I guess going back to, as a GM and, a professional player, I think these are the things that I think I've found that are most helpful for people to get out of slumps. And that is to have balance in your life. So balance on the ice, balance in everything else. I found the hardest thing when I became a professional hockey player was only having hockey. And so valuing, what you think you're supposed to contribute and you're not contributing that is what's deemed a slump. But what we tried to do with players, as I got into more of a mentorship role and then into my GM role, was to provide value what they think they should be doing. So, each person, I talk a lot about roles within, as you can see, the role I played. But the role it's more than one role. So, they might see themselves not scoring, and that's what they think they contribute to a team, or not stopping the puck or whatever it is. But the athletes that I have seen that Dom talked about that are able to get to that next level see themselves as more than just one aspect. So they might have 4 different things that they bring to a team. So they are leaders, they are exceptional passers, maybe they're the hardest workers, and they score goals. So we'll just pretend like that's one athlete. So they're always going to be failing in their minds in one of those areas. But encouraging them as coaches and as mentors in those other areas that they're still doing really well in. I think finding that confidence doesn't always have to come from just one thing that you do. And I specifically look at Jennifer Bothwell. Jennifer, if she didn't score and we won the game, was upset because she didn't score. And I lived with her for a long time. So she was one of the most prolific goal scorers in women's hockey. And how she got out of that mentality was finding other things that she brought to the game. Finding success in the things that she brought to the game. So that's not always easy. But I think as coaches, what we can do is to instill in the athletes, and maybe it's them coming up with the Socrates method, them coming up with what they bring, so that when one aspect of the game isn't going as well as they want it to, it's not deemed to be a slump in their mind, because they can focus on these other things. And like Morris said, there's no real reason why he was in that slump for 15 games. It just, just kind of happens. But if you're still able to find confidence when you go home and you're sitting around having dinner with your family or, with your buddies, you're not in that depressed state. I think that's what can be really difficult for an athlete, is to wrap up your whole sense of worth into one aspect of you, whether it's as an athlete or anything. And then when that doesn't go well, it's like everything else just trails down. So yeah, I would say try to really encourage the athletes in a bunch of different areas. That's my suggestion and I think that is not just that's, women's and men's hockey. And, but it is different with the national team, Wally, because you always feel under the gun. It's a very different, way of coaching, I think, that necessitates a little bit more perhaps love and hand-holding, I think, than what was maybe available or maybe is available when it's an evaluation process.
I don't think that was provided. Anyway, I'm really sorry Morris left, because he went through a slump. And I'm really curious. He's coming back here. So, Morris, I don't know if you heard Sami Jo's talk on dealing with slumps in her female experience on the national team. But when you were dealing with a slump, were you working with Saul Miller at the time?
In that situation, no, I wasn't. But I really liked what Sami had to say. And it's some very good insights into the idea of focusing. There's a package put together, so that's interesting. As I was listening to Sami speak, I was thinking about expectations, and like do personal expectations or team expectations, can those actually contribute to a slump, or can they contribute to excellence? So that was because I know every year I went into a season, I set certain goals, so I had expectations, and the thing was, most of the time, because those were personal goals, so I'd set personal expectations, and then if I wasn't living up to those, I would find that I would press harder to get to those. And then at times I believe that was thing that we messed up on Winnipeg is that we didn't really clearly set out team goals and team expectations. And so that's something I'm going to think about is, do expectations actually contribute to slumps?
I might add something here. I totally believe with what Sami had said in terms of getting balance in your life and getting balance within your game too. And that's, I never, I went through a 9-year scoring slump, so I never was too concerned on the scoring side. But as a defensive defenseman, right, you find your own areas if you're struggling, and that can be maybe not quite as obvious to others, but can be just as decimating to yourself, or just as tough on yourself. So I really believe that recognizing that balance in your game, and so even though I have no expertise in scoring, it might be, am I getting my shot off quick, or am I getting to the right places, and recognizing those components that you need to score, and if you're doing those areas successfully, that'll help you get through it, and not necessarily looking at the end result, but looking at how am I doing with all those components that I need to have lined up for me to get me to my end result. So for me, it's having balance in life, having balance within your game, recognizing those smaller pieces, and not worrying about the big end piece, but rather am I having success with those smaller components that I need to get to, and that's the way, again, from a defensive defenseman perspective, is my footwork correct? Am I in the right place? Am I playing off the right shoulder? Am I doing those little things? Then my plus and minus is going to go up. But I think if you try to just look at it in a bigger picture, it gets tough and can be overwhelming. So that's kind of, for me, to break it down into those simple areas and try to have success that way. I will give you one. Tim might know this story. It'll be quick. Scotty Bowman's obviously one of the better coaches of all time. Barclay Plager, one of the better players of all time. A tremendous defenseman playing for St. Louis Blues. But things weren't going well for Barclay. And Scotty called him into the office and said, Barclay, you can't pass worth a shit. Your shot is pathetic. People are going around you. And on top of that, you're playing with no confidence. Right? That's just right. You can't demand confidence out of people. You have to give them those little pieces of success to help them build themselves back up.
You have to transmit belief.
There you go.
Terry, that's the story about Scotty.
Small pieces. Give small pieces to help build up. Is that what you said, Terry?
Yeah, something like that.
He needed a confidence on both.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, I totally agree with both Sami and TJ's perspective on the balance piece. Lots of success, I think, in the past. And there's really two situations when Morris brought up what are the keys to breaking a slump thing. You can have a goal scorer who's in a slump, who's not creating any chances, and then what does he or she need to do to correct that piece? Then there's the other situation, like Morris pointed out, where maybe you've got a goal scorer who is getting a lot of chances but's not scoring. For me, the part of the solution is always the same, and it's exactly what Terry and Sami just really spoke about. Is okay, let's get the focus off the scoring, and what else can you do to contribute to the team's success? Number one, can you back check hard? Can you create loose pucks? Can you create scoring chances for other people? Can you win a race? Can you win a battle? So having that balance and encouraging that balance in your game takes the focus off the scoring, which we all know will eventually come back. So that's like a huge piece of it for me, is to simplify. And in Terry's case, where he's not going to score, we'll have to wait 10 years before we actually see him score. So, what are the things that he can do to simplify his game to step by step, as he mentioned, build confidence. Like just take pride in making that one good outlet pass or that one good D-to-D pass to your partner that gets you out of trouble, or good one-on-one battle in the corner in front of the net. Breaking the game down into little pieces that you can have success with. And then, as Sammy pointed out, let Blotz learned was to have a better understanding of your holistic game, that it's not simply scoring. It is a big piece for some players, but it shouldn't be the only thing they contribute to a team, really. So lots of success, simplifying, getting the focus on the things that the team helps the team be successful. I was going to say needs, Morris, but I didn't want to use that word.
Good.
Do the things that state who you are and what you do as a team. And I love that terminology, as I pointed out.
I did have a question for Dominic. Is he still on the call?
Yeah, I'm here, Mo.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to